Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. We'll just wait for maybe half a minute before we start the webinar, just to give everyone some time to join. Ajoka, could I maybe request you during when I speak to let people in, please?
Yes, sure.
Thank you. All right, since it's 2 minutes past 3, then I say let's get started. Welcome everyone to the community webinar of the Book and Claim community. We have a good schedule today, packed schedule, and we're excited to share some updates from the Book and Claim space, and get together and discuss the things that are going on. My name is Maaike Postuma. I am project manager within the MBM team from Smart Freight Center, and I'll be opening and closing today's meeting. For the rest, we have a good set of speakers. So as you see, Peggy Kellen has joined us from CRS, from the Center of Resource Solutions, and Mark Boyd as well from Platformable will take us through some interesting topics. So a mandatory note for today. The first one is this webinar will be recorded. So if you would not like to be on camera, then please keep off your camera. And then a mandatory note as well. Please don't share any sensitive information that can be competitively sensitive, or please don't share anything that could be compromising for anyone. And then let's go on to the next topics for today. We'll tell you a little bit about the Book and Claim community, just for those who are new, those who we know already, maybe a good refresher. We will talk a little bit about the GHG Protocol Scope 2 revision. We'll have a topic on interoperability research. And then afterwards, we'll talk about the SBTi Corporate Net Zero Standard 2.0 revision. So that's a mouthful. And then lastly, we'll discuss a bit about the outlook and what's coming for the Book and Claim community. And also a warm welcome. I saw that a few of our governing board members are here as well, so that's good to see. And then I say, let's get started, and I'll give the floor to Quinten.
Hello, everybody. Appreciate you all being here. Exciting to have another chance to discuss. And again, big thanks to Peggy and Mark for lending us their expertise and dedicating their time to this subject. A lot going on, too much to cover in 1 hour. So of course, we're just going to get on to a few snippets and fun items in this time. But wanted to first ground folks in, kind of why we're here and what, especially for those who are somewhat new to the Book and Claim community, what we have been focusing on with this group. So, the market context, like other hard to abate industries, is intense. We have, of course, the specter of climate change and rising greenhouse gas emissions broadly, but specifically within transport, as indicated by the colorful boxes in many of the slides that make it into our presentations, things are complex out there. Freight and heavy transportation specifically is an interconnected, difficult, costly, and unique industry. It has a lot of exchanging handshakes. It has many different types of organizations involved. Supply chains are long, and it takes this size of group of people in collaboration across the globe, across modes, to try and untangle it. We are here as the Book and Claim community to try and be a central hub, reduce duplication, and overall help develop, support, and promote really high quality approaches to Book and Claim the founding ethos of this group was really kind of rooted in this idea that there shouldn't be, we should break down barriers so that everyone can access high quality book and claim practices, learnings, and we can level up as an industry in transportation. Also, of course, as a theme in this session, learn from our colleagues in other industries and with, non-specifically transport expertises. So a lot going on in the book and claim community. Wanted to quickly give you an idea of who has been involved and is involved in these organizations and how or these work products, and give you a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more later about how to get involved, but of who has been rolling up their sleeves of late. So we have a strategic advisory board of key organizations, and we thank them for their time and support. We have modal champions who are helping us dive into specific modal topics. We take that central hub, non-duplicative space ethos to heart, where we're trying to help fill in, especially in some modal work where there is a little bit less attention, a lot of attention, of course, on aviation and a little bit less on maritime. So we try and fill in, for example, with, a road working group. We have kind of another level of expert collaborators, whether it's organizations that have even come to kind of the idea of being a strategic partner, or those organizations who helped us write the principles and best practices, or who are captains in the road group. Some certain organizations that are kind of stepping forward as being greater contributors. We have these public work groups such as the road working group, as I mentioned, or registry interoperability work, or other ad hoc groups that pop up. And so there are opportunities to join and paddle with us in these contexts. And the Secretariat. So we have Smart Freight Center and RSB as the Secretariat for the book and claim community now. And a shout out to RMI, who helped us get this off the ground as the Secretariat in past years. A little bit about ways to get involved and be engaged. Many of you probably found out about a previous webinar through the newsletter. So make sure you're signed up there. Principles and best practices of book and claim systems in heavy transport. Still an amazingly helpful document. I'm constantly enthused by those folks who say, "Oh, I read that document, and this certain piece spoke to me." It's often one that I didn't expect. And we also have an education page, some interesting topics as well, such as that little slide article right there of how to talk about book and claim with your colleagues. Always helpful to get a couple tips how to explain this to folks. So check that out as well, and give us your feedback on what information will be helpful for you and yours in the future. We are not polling you right now, so we're just can warm up the engines a little bit with actually some results from a community poll we did recently. So we got a few suggestions of what topics were on people's mind about the principles and best practices. There are 11 principles of this document, and a number of best practices underneath each principle. And wanted to just show you what the results were of these. So we had about 25 people answer these in a couple of different moments, and it was just really interesting. We wanted to kind of share this data, and we might share a little bit more of some of the short answers in the upcoming newsletter. But these statements of whether people agree or disagree strongly on the left and agree strongly on the right, where certifying attributes is hard, transparency is all that is necessary to book. Thought that was interesting. Organizations should procure and report attributes via book and claim of products that match the nature of the products that are in their own inventory. Also interesting to see how people answered that one. Book and claim registry operators should maintain independence and neutrality. It's a fairly overwhelming answer. More registries related to transportation, the better. Each attribute selling organization can have their own registry. also a fairly enthusiastic response towards the disagree side. And this other statement, most of the time, voluntary additionality status is quite clear in my book and claim transactions. And this one was really interesting, right? It's a fairly balanced response. The next one, book and claim transactions should be an integral part of an organization's inventory accounting, i.e. attributional inventory accounting. Overwhelming yes. The fun part of this is book and claim transactions should be registered as emissions savings versus the counterfactual baseline that are to be deducted, i.e. kind of like the consequential reduction. Also a little bit less sure, but also enthusiasm. The virtual delivery of attributes is just as traceable as physical delivery of products with attributes. You know, this one's a little bit preaching to the choir of a bunch of book and claim folks, but good to see the enthusiasm there. Accounting and reporting standards and frameworks should maintain independence and neutrality. So even more enthusiasm along that line than registries. Finally, erroneous double counting is a real problem I see today. A little bit more enthusiasm towards it being actually a disagreement, which was a curious response. But yeah, hope that kind of warms up the engines. See whether you agree, disagree, you know, and we'd love your feedback. But just one of those mini snapshots of some of the information out there of what's going on in the community square. And we've taken this to heart as well, and we'll be including a little bit of related content in the upcoming newsletter to try and reflect back some of the themes that you felt were important from these surveys. So with that, appreciate it. Thank you for getting in the mood of book and claim, of flexible chains of custody. Of course, we're talking transportation, but with the GHGP activity recently, I am super excited to hear from Peggy, and big thanks to you for lending us your expertise and showing us some of your perspective from CRS. So feel free to take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just make sure. Can everyone see my slide all right? Great. Hi. So I thought I'd just start and introduce myself. I'm a Senior Director of Policy and Market Development, Center for Resource Solutions, or CRS. In my personal capacity, I also sit on the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 2 Technical Working Group. So that's why I'm able to share some of this today. I want to focus on updates in a brief amount of time that are relevant to book and claim systems. So I'll be focusing on the market-based accounting framework today. So CRS, just a little bit about us. We're an NGO. We've been around about 30 years almost, working to advance sustainable energy through credible markets. We essentially act on behalf of consumers to ensure they have exclusive rights to the energy resources they're purchasing in order to grow demand for new sustainable energy. Our longest running offering is our Green E Energy Certification Program, which began focused on electricity, but now includes some biomethane and soon hydrogen and other fuels. And then we have a couple other programs relevant to our conversation today. One is the Clean Energy Accounting Project, a thought leadership initiative where we develop accounting guidance on narrow, outstanding questions in voluntary and regulatory energy markets. So an example, this year we developed a guidance document on market-based accounting for clean fuels, which took the existing quality criteria from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 2 guidance and adapted them to the fuel sectors. And then another relevant one is just our Clean Energy Tracking Collaborative, or SETC, which is very new, but it's bringing U.S. electricity tracking systems together to evolve and consistently and transparently expand infrastructure that scales markets for electricity and fuels. So a little bit about us. But on to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol update. I just wanted to sit on this slide for a moment. So it's the summary slide the Greenhouse Gas Protocol has put forward. And these are what is being discussed in their phase 1 update. So this is the first public comment period on a subset of issues that the technical working group has been dealing with for quite some time, about a year now. You'll see there's some location-based method updates, which I won't cover today, and then there are market-based method updates and some feasibility measures, which are intended to help make those market-based and location-based policy changes a little bit more manageable for more folks. So the biggest ones are hourly matching, deliverability, standard supply service, and updates to residual mix. I'll touch a little bit more on each of those as we go. And I would just say, again, this is relevant to electricity because it is scope 2, but this is the first place where the Greenhouse Gas Protocol has really addressed book and claim, and they want to have some consistency across all of the applications of book and claim through the different groups. So it's helpful to think about what's going on in electricity as you think about expanding it to other applications as well. So one of the first major updates that has been talked about quite a lot is a change to quality criteria 4, which is temporal correlation. Here, the protocol is requiring that reporters match contractual instruments or energy attribute certificates in this case to electricity consumption on an hourly basis. And they also require that the most precise data available be used. And that in order to get to this, if you don't have precise data, in order to get to it, you can use profiled load data to break down less granular information into hourly increments. There are, in terms of feasibility mechanisms for this, some proposed exception thresholds. It's one of the items that's out for comment. It is one case, one application of looking at it, and it's one we talked about for the longest amount of time in the working group, is the volume of electricity consumption in a given grid region, and some proposed levels for that are 5, 10, or 50 gigawatt hours. Another option that has come about later in the development process is the idea of a company size exemption threshold. And this was patterned after somewhat the approach SBTi was taking about small and medium enterprises. So a big change from an hourly reporting framework now to requiring, annual now to requiring hourly. I'll just mention the location-based method. There's a similar temporal correlation preference, but there they just ask that you use the best, the smallest increment for which you have good data available. And so they don't force the matching on an hourly basis using these load profiles in that approach. So it's another way that folks are thinking about the hourly component. Flying through these. The next really important one is quality criteria 5, which is market boundaries and alternate methodology for deliverability. So here, we typically operate, for electricity, we have typically national markets. At the moment, in some cases, we have multinational markets, like in the EU. And so this has essentially borrowed some thinking, especially from the 45V tax credit language in the US, where there's an interest in making those market boundaries smaller to better represent the generation that could actually be serving the region that a customer's load is located in. So this requirement is requiring that instruments shall be sourced from generation that is deemed deliverable to the consuming load. And then the protocol has put forward some definitions of what deliverability are. And this number 1 option is the vast majority of cases will be electricity from the source of purchased generation that is physically able to reach the reporting consumer's grid region. And then there are some options where they considered, maybe from a neighboring grid region would be possible, that being a marginal price in deliverable market boundaries is less than 1.05 times the price in the adjacent region. So you're not just really trying to purchase much cheaper energy. And then exclusive rights to transmission capacity can be demonstrated across regional boundaries, which is more of a bundled concept where you're both getting the attributes and you're showing that you physically could bring that power across to your region. So other updates that are, I think, helpful for the protocol to be refining. Some of these concepts are there in the current guidance, but not very visibly described, is the introduction of a new concept called standard supply service. And so this is looking at, in the default electricity product that the customer might get from their utility, if there are carbon-free resources in that, do the customers have the right to be claiming that? And if so, how do they prove it? So standard supply services propose definitions that there's a traceable and mandatory financial relationship between the customer and the generation. So it could be something as simple in the US as a renewable portfolio standard that your utility is providing to you through a regulation, but it can be other types of relationships as well, like a feed-in tariff or something in another jurisdiction. So this high-level definition was necessary given all the different structures in energy markets. So it's applicable to both carbon-free and fossil resources. Whatever you're getting by default, that's what you have the right to claim. Suppliers should apply that to customers on a pro rata basis. You can't just claim portions of it, or a supplier can't give it all to one customer, because typically those are being procured on behalf of a community, and so the pro rata distribution of those benefits is appropriate. And then any associated contractual instruments must be retired, of course, to prevent double counting. One of the important things to note for standard supply service in the proposal is it also does have to be hourly and locationally matched. So right now, sometimes this information is available, but not typically on that granular of a level just yet. And then finally, that is relevant to some updates they're making to the emission factor hierarchy. So this is if you have really specific data about particularly energy attribute certificates or RECs, that would be at the top of the emission factor hierarchy. You use the emissions rate associated with that. And then going on down the line in the current version, at the bottom of the hierarchy, you would have a grid average emission factor because everyone had some version of that. So here they're proposing that on the market-based method, the bottom of the hierarchy, or towards the bottom, will have more focus on residual mix. So this is anything that does that's not in standard supply service, SSS, or voluntary procurement. It's all the unallocated attributes and loads. For residual mix, there's no hourly requirement, although you do have to maintain the deliverability requirement being in the same region. And then for default emission factors, this is where they're moving away from the grid average emission factors, and instead reporters must use a fossil-based emission factor. And you can have that in the proposal reflect the electricity generation within the boundary where you're consuming power. So if you are in a region that uses primarily natural gas, that could be natural gas. It could also be a mix of fossil emission factors. It does get pretty simplified at the bottom of the hierarchy. But altogether, these requirements are resulting in environments where if you don't have great data on an hourly basis from your supplier, you could very quickly fall into the range where your procurements or your standard supply information will end up being reported as fossil in the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 2 market-based total. And so it's definitely a big change in terms of the capacity of the market right now to support it, but potentially in the future will be a lot better. And I think that was my 10 minutes, but happy always to answer questions now or offline. That was the fastest overview I've done to date. And I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. I'll leave the floor open maybe for 1 or 2 questions. Maybe raise your hand if you have a question for Peggy.
Hi, Marika here from Shell. One question. Thank you so much, Peggy, for that overview. Very helpful. Do you have already an idea on how this could be applied to fuels? Very high level, of course.
Yes. So it is being handled in a different working group, but there is a big focus across all of the standard updates to have more understanding of the physical or perceived physical reality of what's happening. So particularly that deliverability requirement rule change was really intended to say it's not credible for power from one end of the country to be getting to me on the other end of the country. There are transmission constraints. It's just not getting here. And the protocol is taking a stance at the moment of saying that you have to have some plausible physical relationship to what you're procuring. And so in fuels where you have much more complicated physical relationships among the value chain, that can make, reduce the ability to transact as broadly. And it kind of restricts the size of markets for attributes because they have to have a physical connection. And so I think that's a key update across all the standards, especially relevant to book and claim, where you're using the certificate-based chain of custody. And so I would expect that for fuels, there would also be limitations based on physical deliverability proposed there. So that is the biggest takeaway to me. The hourly requirements aren't as challenging, I believe, for fuels, or it's a different idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marika and Peggy. So in the interest of time, I think we'll move on to the next topic. Thank you very much, Peggy, for your contribution. All right, so next we're going to have Mark Boyd from Platformable talk us through some interoperability research. So Mark, take the floor, please.
Okay, great. Thanks for the invitation to share this with you all, and thanks, Max, for organising for me to be here. Okay, so I'm Mark Boyd I'm the director of Platformable, where we support the development of open digital ecosystems. So we've done this kind of work looking at ecosystems with ISEAL, with banking and finance, with big players like MasterCard. We've done it with in the health sector with pharmaceutical companies like Roche, and we've done it in the agri-food sector and in the sustainability sector as well. So we'll be drawing on some of those ecosystem thinking ideas as we present today. Okay, so first of all, thank you to, so this project was run by RSB, and we were the external contractor for delivering on the research, and the funding came from ISEAL and through the Swiss government. And thanks to those. What we were looking at, or the overall, the full project, we were involved with some of the research elements and the definition. So basically it started in 2024 and was looking at how do you build registry interoperability pathways for the book and claim community, and then for book and claim sector. And then, out of that, what's the best ways for implementing that interoperability? We'll come back and I'll describe this in a little bit more, and then proposing the technical components. But you can see here already in that research, it was very much about the technical feasibility of, what sort of solution would enable a range of book and claim registries to be able to share data on the fuel that is made available, and we'll see, you know, the main use case was around double issuance. I'll get into that in a minute as well. Okay, cool. So and then, you know, we were led by a expert group that came from a range of the different stakeholders across the ecosystem of the book and claim ecosystem. So registry operators and client solutions, industry representatives, standards bodies, technical experts, auditors, and so on. You can see some of those who, all of those who were involved in that expert group. And thank you all for your input into this research if you're joining us here today. Okay, just a very quick recap. So the book and claim registry sector is growing quickly. As Quinton pointed out, it's complex. It's covering a complex supply chain, a lot of interconnections in there as well, but it is growing rapidly because of the role of regulations and the opportunities there. And there was 3 types of challenges that emerged then for book and claim around whether or not a fuel source has been listed more than one time. So you've got double use and double claim risks as far as types of double counting risks. And those two, the first two, are generally solved by internal processes. So if the book and claim is following things like the principles and best practices from that hard transport model, paper that's excellent that we used in this research as well, that, you know, like that's got a very clear set of principles and guidance around assurance and how you manage, you know, these double claim risks and so on. And there's thinking across the sector around how to do that from a registry best practice level. They are solved by internal processes. But then when you've got a double issuance, so if we see a double issuance as being a provider of fuel wants to list on more than one registry, and so that they're almost like they're then presenting, you know, whether that's through confusion or accident or through malicious behavior, they're trying to sell the fuel, the carbon allowance of the fuel, which is separated from the fuels, in more than one registry, then you know, like an individual book and claim registry isn't going to notice that. That requires a shared interconnected approach, again, like Quinton was saying, that enables that sort of data sharing across across registries in an ecosystem sort of environment to be able to check if that fuel is listed on any of the other registries. So that was sort of the starting point for looking at, okay, if we're looking at an ecosystem approach and doing interoperability, let's start with this challenge and resolve this sort of challenge. So that is where an ecosystem approach is sort of needed. And just quickly, again, based on this research that the work we've done with those other sectors, banking, health, traceability, agri-food, and so on, what we tend to find is that there's 6 levels, and apologies for the size of this. You can zoom in on the video, I guess. But so basically in an ecosystem maturity, what we generally tend to see is, first of all, there's regulations introduced, and then standards are adapted to meet those regulations or to update, so the data models and so on are done, which out of that creates new data models. And then data is increasingly collected, initially to provide for that regulation reporting and compliance, but then organizations start to realize the data itself is valuable, and they look at use cases beyond just regulatory compliance for use of the data. We see that all the time in, you know, better logistics, for example, in agri-food, you know, like originally that's collected for some compliance, and then it helps with managing global trade and logistics, for example. But then out of that, then new relationships emerge to manage that data, because no one organization is going to be able to manage the data business models, store the data, analyze the data, all of that sort of stuff. So you're starting to move then into an ecosystem where you're relying on a whole range of other tool providers to support you in your in the value you're generating from your data. And so then out of that, that then produces like a new data economy, if you like, here in this stage. And then that's when you've got a really flourishing digital ecosystem with lots of new ideas, new partnerships where you're collaborating in some ways on new digital tools, you're competing directly in the market on the quality and basis of your data, and a whole range of things in between as well. So that's sort of generally how the ecosystem matures. And what we're doing with the book and claim is really just this first two steps, you know. So basically there's regulations and standards around fuel and the carbon allowances, and that needs to be recorded, which is, you know, where the book and claim innovation of separating the fuel source from the carbon allowance or the accreditation arises. And then out of that, then there's those new data models and new ways of like sharing the data across the different players in that model. So that's what we're looking at here. So when the interoperability, this research started, you know, what we needed to do was understand the players, and that was done by, you know, looking at that expert group and having a range of different stakeholders involved. And then out of that, those expert group members were then committing to interoperability and being involved in being able to share that data in some sort of way. I'll get to the sharing of the data in a sec. But so for those unclear, you know, to just clarify what I mean by interoperability, it's the ability for multiple systems, independent systems, to be able to generate value by connecting in some way. Then once you do that at a basic level, in this case, you know, checking the data for double issuance, but you could go on to then collaborate for forming partnerships and approaching the market together. You can co-create and build digital services or solutions together. You can complement, so one's got a platform and another one's building the tool that sits on that platform or some sort of integration, all of those sorts of things for some elements. And then also you might still be going to market directly and competing in other aspects as well. That's where the ecosystem could go in the future, but we're not talking about, but you know, like we also need to take step by step, because it's, you know, there's a lot of competition in the book and claim community. We saw at the beginning of this meeting, you know, there was that antitrust reminder, you know, so that's sort of really front of mind for you all, I know. So, you know, when we're talking about interoperability and data sharing and working together, it's with, you know, being very clear about how much you can share and where you're at the moment. So it's really about building that trust in the ecosystem first by starting on something that you can all agree on before then, you know, trying to look at collaborations and co-creations. Because of time, I'll jump forward a little bit of this, but there's basically 4 levels of interoperability. Can the systems connect? So that, you know, they've got the technical capacity to connect. Can they communicate? So they're using a similar programming style or whatever to be able to push data back and forth. Can they comprehend? So are they using a data model that the sender and the receiver both understand that unit means this? You know, and is it operational? So are there the governance processes that encourage collaboration for all of the players that are involved? When we looked at this, we developed a book and claim registry ecosystem. Follow up with me later if you're interested in digging into this. It's something that we see always is missing from any ecosystems with the way it's sort of working with, and we've mapped out the players so that you can sort of see what are their relationships, who's using data, what are the components involved, and then we mapped that to some of the players. What I really want to touch on here is that you're wearing multiple hats. So you'll have, here you can see, so RSB, for example, they're a standards body, but they also have a book and claim registry. And what I thought was interesting in the poll that Quinton showed was that the only area in the poll that people all 100% agreed was just either agree or strongly agree is that the registry should maintain neutrality. So the ecosystem level registry should maintain neutrality. So that is important when you're thinking about these multiple roles, because then you've got situations where if you're a registry operator and a standards body, you might not be suited to then managing that ecosystem role if you're trying to encourage everyone to be involved as well. We have a theory of change, but really it comes back to something Peggy was saying from CRS, which was basically that if you're going to be encouraging fuel efficiencies or lower emissions, then you really need to build the credibility of the market. So, double issuance is a great area to focus on, because it's showing that it's not greenwashing, and that there is a credibility around the exchange of the carbon allowances of fuels that's not going to be, duplicated, and someone's, two people or two organizations are getting the benefits from the fuel listing. Our findings, and again, you can find out more. There's a report that Max will release. But basically, we found that while we were focused on the technical approaches, it's really the governance that was the big issue. So impartiality was really needed. So in order to get an interoperable ecosystem pathway up, so some sort of mechanism where people felt comfortable sharing the data, and we're talking high-level data, we're not talking scope data, and we're also talking about the need for something where it's, so here it says actually data minimization, so just really basic stuff, the POS ID maybe, location and date, and that the response wouldn't be yes, this is listed or whatever, it's by so and so, it's just yes, there is a listing of that POS ID on another one, or well, there's something else on another registry. We're not even saying what registry, but another registry has got something with the same location and date. So get your auditors to check it out. So something really high level with that, and also with data security. So no one should be able to read the data. It needs to be encrypted on sharing, go into a central place where the interoperability engine can then do the quick check and then provide that response as far as if there's an issuance or risk or not, and there's no one looking or able to manage or hold that data or seeing it in any way. So what we found is that technical approach is possible. We can build that, and we've done the API specifications and shown how that's done. The challenge is the governance issue, and that's that issue of the operational interoperability. Who's going to manage this project? How independent are they? How do we know that they're not looking at the data, and so on? When we looked at other sectors, all of the other sectors doing book and claim are also facing this. It's an unsolved issue for the most part. It's fragmented. There's a lot of duplication. It's siloed. Where we saw that there was one example that we saw that we liked was the biomethane, I think it is, in Europe, where there is an independent global body or an independent European-wide body, and then there's the national book and claim registries for that then feed into that. So they're sure that it's just, and that's all that body does, is the ecosystem registry. Then there's a range of technical solutions. I won't go into those. At the end of our research, we provided what we call an interoperability toolkit. So it's the API specifications. We've got a data book so that everyone can do that, sort of align their data so the data, can be comprehended by any of the systems. And you're talking about like versus like. Then we suggested the governance templates, and there were two that really need to be resolved before you could move forward with an ecosystem registry, and that is assurance. So who's involved in the registry, and how are they certifying their fuel units that they're making available. And again, the principles from the principles and best practices document from book and claim community is one of the sources we said was a good example of how you could do that. And you need a conflict of interest policy, so that impartiality policy. And again, we've put in some recommendations about sources that you can use for that. and then an onboarding guide, which we don't think it will be necessary in the first instance. If you started small, you could sort of do that one-to-one. But if there was more than, once you start getting up, then you need a developer portal and so on. I think that's all my time that's all the time I've got, but please stay in touch. That's my email, or look me up on LinkedIn. I hope I've done it in the time, maybe a little bit over, so my apologies.
Thanks, Mark. Not a problem. Very interesting. And I hope everyone found that interesting. We'll skip the questions for now, indeed, because of timing. But you all have Mark's contact details here. So, and also send us an email if you want to know more about it. Thank you, Mark. Then let's move on to the next topic. We have lots to discuss. We're moving on to Science-Based Targets Initiative. Quentin, please go ahead.
All right. So much fun going on. We also were really excited for this opportunity, especially with the Scope 2 conversation, to even potentially chat a little bit about the other side of Scope 2 being natural gas and some of the book and claim and market-based approaches there. Just going to drop in a link so we can hopefully give you just a tidbit of that information as well, and you can investigate on your own, but take a look at some of the history from GHGP around that topic as well. Big thanks to our guests. Super interesting perspectives on both how Scope 2 is developing. The transportation market has always looked at the previous uses of book and claim and flexible chain of custody for indicators. So it will be truly insightful to see how that market develops. Of course, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and there can be slightly different levels of maturity. We can't treat everyone with the same ruler. But it's really interesting to see where the electric sector is going, especially with subjects such as deliverability. With SBTi, there is a lot going on and hundreds of questions in this consultation. We wanted to try and boil it down to a few different things, and then provide some next steps and opportunities to get engaged. Just wanted to highlight that this idea of book and claim, of something other than physical deliverable transportation, whether it's services or transportation fuel, is still in the document. Some of that language that we were all excited about around direct or indirect mitigation has been removed, and it's been replaced with some other related and similar language about activity pools, and still has the option to use unbundled EACs, environmental attribute certificates. In this case, unbundled is talking about the separation between the physicality of that thing, i.e. a fuel or a service, and the deliverability of it. So that is the unbundling of EACs. They've also removed absolute targets, and now give a few options, including volume alignment, where over 90% of your volumes need to be aligned to sector benchmarks. Those benchmarks would be in terms of grams of CO2e, or supplier alignment, and a similar type of threshold. That is definitely interesting. Some people like this flexibility. It would ease compliance and give organizations in the idea that they're going to be able, more of a feeling that they can get to that target and achieve it. Some people don't like that, and they think that more options kind of weaken the overall integrity of targets and the overall exercise. Of course, lots going on in each of these decisions. There is other interesting development, such as the possibility to exclude well to tank emissions for fuels included in scopes 1 and 2, and have more of a tank to wake approach. This is interesting, especially given a lot of the development in the transportation market, recognizing more of a well to wheel, well to wake overall perspective across various modes, especially, let's say, maritime. And similar to what Peggy mentioned around, small and medium enterprises, there's a little bit of discussion within SBTi, which she insinuated that has been spreading across to GHGP. It's great to have these organizations co-referencing each other. So that's what we have for the moment. There's the consultation on the SBTi Corporate Net Zero Standard V2 is open until the 8th of December. Again, there are hundreds of questions, I think over 200 questions you could answer. They do a pretty good job of allowing you to focus and zoom in on what you would like to answer and feel competent to answer. We're going to be putting out a newsletter in, I think, just about a week, and we'll be including a little bit more of information to help you provide a response. We would encourage you to do so. And also would love to just get some of your thoughts on the overall effort. A few overall questions. In this case, we are not pointing at specific questions, I don't believe, for this moment. So maybe we'll be able to add that QR code at the very end as well, just so you can grab it if you don't at this exact moment. We'll also probably send or drop a link maybe in the chat as well, but would appreciate your thoughts, candid and helpful. Thanks so much. Thank you, Mark, and I will pass it off to Max. Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.
Thank you, Quentin. Let me try to take control. Oh, that is working. So my name is Max Eichelbaum. I'm Associate Director, Book and Claim and Digital Solutions at the RSB. Really great to be here. Thank you also to the speakers for making time today to share their knowledge with us. Really exciting to see all those advancements. To round the webinar up, we thought it's a good opportunity also to quickly give you an outlook what's going to happen in the next year. We have it on our website. You are familiar with might be familiar with our work areas, but there are 4 main categories. So it's reporting and targets. We want to make sure that the systems that are being developed are also somehow in sync with the different standards that are being developed. So it's linked to also what just Quentin has elaborated on. We want to collect feedback in the community and bring that back to the standard setters, making sure that the voices are heard and making that process also somehow streamlined and efficient. There's still some gaps in certification, so we see also the need that there's still a harmonization needed in the wider ecosystem on how certifications are called, what information is in there, how they're treated. So we definitely see there's still some need for harmonization, also something we would like to continue working on. Then registries and applications. We have seen Mark's presentation about interoperability and the ICU research where we evaluated the technical solutions that we could use in an ecosystem of registries to make the exchange of information possible. So of course, everyone or organizations focus on their own registries, but there is now with a growing ecosystem the need for harmonization, making sure that these registries speak to each other and that we have a proper exchange of information. And then capacity and communication. I think this is something we cannot hold high enough, and it's something we need to remind ourselves that we need to speak the same language and that we need to make sure everyone is communicating in the same way and also has the same understanding when we use certain terms and how they should be put in perspective. Then with our advisory board, we looked at the different topics and this is what was being shortlisted as the activities we want to focus on in 26. So alignment and conversions of book and claim systems. I identify gaps, and this is, I think, where especially the community will be helpful to get additional input where you see needs and friction in the wider ecosystem that needs to be addressed, and that we can help to somehow resolve. Then leverage the community's principles and best practices. So we want to continue working on this and make this even a better piece, as it is already highlighted by Quentin in the beginning of the meeting. Registry interoperability, as Mark explained, so we with the expert group, we were able to define a technical solution that is most suited to build this ecosystem of registries. And we have now a technical foundation we can use to build a governance framework around, which is very, very much needed for guidance. So this is something we would like to do in the book and claim community with an expert group. So developing an interoperability or a registry governance framework so that we can then move onwards to the implementation and operationalizing this ecosystem. So this governance framework is something we will develop over the next year. Then integration book and claim principles. So we have just heard a couple of words from Quentin about SBTi. Again, we want to get your feedback on this and then provide feedback to the different standard setters in the different, and then specifically for the different standard modes. Policy and compliance integration. There are also many regulators looking into book and claim. So we also need to make sure that the systems that are already put in place, specifically for the voluntary market today, are also in sync with the government or regulators that also start developing systems. And we have already very promising discussions with these regulators, and they're aware that there is momentum in the voluntary market and that we need to work together to make sure that we all march towards the same direction. Transportation mode specific work. This is where Ajoka will update you on. So there's a lot of stuff happening already also in the road transportation sector, especially in the book and claim community, where there is being a book and claim white paper being developed. So that's something he will update you on soon. And then community level work, which is where this webinar is part of today. And I just want to quickly highlight how you can get engaged with the book and claim community. So we will have a quarterly public webinar, having speakers presenting latest updates or anything that is worth discussing. We will have a monthly newsletter. Please, have a look at it. There's going to be one soon as a follow-up of this public webinar. And maybe there's, it's a case for me. I receive so many newsletters and they, end up in a separate folder, but have a look at this folder, making sure you don't miss out on our book and claim community newsletter. There will be technical working groups, and then these technical working groups will work on guidance materials, frameworks, etc. We will ultimately also bring them to the community level, where we want to share what has been developed and get also your feedback on to really scrutinize what has been developed and really get as many people involved as possible. And there will be some in-person engagements. So there will be another meeting at the New York Climate Week next year, but then also we hope that we have some additional side events at some larger conference where we can meet in person and discuss some ongoing topics. So thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to the next year. I think it's going to be very exciting. There's a lot of stuff I think that's going to happen, and I'm really looking forward to engaging more with the entire community. Back to you, Maike. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Max. So that marks the end of today's webinar. Thank you everyone so much for your attention and your attendance. One note, we'll be preparing to ask you for feedback on both the GHGP and the SBTi consultations. So be on the lookout for that in our newsletter next week. And thanks for joining again, and wishing you a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.